So we had a massive game with the USC Trojans taking on the Michigan Wolverines, and the game came down towards the end of the game, and Michigan was able to run the football in, and USC was not able to get that stop on the defensive side. And today we're going to talk about what we saw from that game. I felt like Michigan did a lot of really, really good things on the offensive side. Alec Orji, to me, is probably the quarterback as you go forward, but I'll also state this. Michigan plays a defense, and it's not saying that USC's defensive line is not good, but if Michigan plays a defense and a defensive line that could stop the run, and I know it's a hard thing to do, it's easier to say it, Michigan's gonna have to throw the football, and I'm not sure if Alex Orji showed me that he can get it done through the air. But let's talk about this game a little bit. I think USC gave this game away. I think USC was clearly the better team, especially on the offensive side of the football. I do think the one thing that kind of favored Michigan in this game was the fact that Michigan was at home, USC was not. At the same time, USC had some plays where you had the pick six to Will Johnson that kind of flipped the game. Michigan's offense really wasn't doing all that much, but they did have two monster plays through the ground. Mullings had one big touchdown run. I think it was like 50 plus yards. And he had another touchdown, or he had another play at the end of the game. It wasn't a touchdown, but he got all the way down towards like the 10-yard line. And that was at the end of the game, of course. And USC just wasn't able to stop Michigan, right? Michigan had those big plays. They had those big moments. Miller Moss, I feel like, had a really, really good game. One of the things that I feel like people will overlook with Miller Moss taking on Michigan is, one, this is an away game, right? It's a hard environment. It's very, very tough. You're in Ann Arbor. Michigan has that home field advantage. You got the fans going crazy. On top of that, when you consider the fact that Michigan is probably the best defense in the country, maybe not the best, but they're one of the top 2 to 5 defenses in the country. And I'm talking about like real talent, right? Maybe that's not what the stats actually show. But to me, Kenneth Grant is a freaking monster, man. Grant, to me, is the guy. I know people love Mason Graham. I'm a Grant guy. Josiah Stewart, man, was phenomenal. And Stewart really didn't play a whole lot for Michigan last year. He transferred over from Coastal Carolina last year. Didn't play a lot. He's been relied upon for Michigan, and he got after it a little bit. And USC's offense line struggled. To me, this game really came down to the fact that Michigan had a great defense. They made some plays on the defensive side. And then on top of that, on the offensive side, Michigan had some big plays, right? You had some big runs. You had some, you had the defensive play as well by Will Johnson. But I felt like Miller Moss still played a really, really good game. And I feel like USC will bounce back after this loss to Michigan. Tough environment, tough loss. But you only lose by 3 points, right? This wasn't a blowout by any means. And honestly, I felt like with USC, they had a really good second half, right? And I felt like through the air, they kind of opened things up a little bit. The ground game was pretty solid for the most part, right? Jacobius Marks had 13 carries, 100 yards. Zakarian Branch showed up, right? He had 6 catches for 98 yards. He had a really, really good day as well. But at the end of the day, USC was not able to get it done. And to me, it was mostly the defense wasn't able to get the stop, right? Because Michigan ran the ball at the end of the game. When Michigan was down 4 points, they had to score a touchdown. There was like 2-3 minutes left at the end of the game. Michigan had to score a touchdown, and they weren't going to do that through the air, right? Orji had like 12 pass attempts for 37 yards. He hasn't shown us yet that he's going to be able to win the ball, win a game with his arm, and he might not need to be honest. Michigan has a good offensive line, but we knew that they were going to ultimately run the football at the end of that game, and USC's defense was not able to get it done. Now they had some moments on that drive, right? There were some third down situations where they were potentially able to get off the field. I think the touchdown that Michigan had was even on 4th down. So, there was a moment where even on 3rd or 4th down, if you get that stop, you may be able to win this game. Although they would have probably went for it on 3rd down. And that was right as Mullings busted that like 60-yard run that ultimately got Michigan at the end of the game into the red zone. But I felt like USC did a pretty good job for the most part. Right? It was just a couple of big plays that really changed this game, even through the ground. And then they just weren't able to do their thing. I didn't feel like the blocking was that good for USC. In fact, I'd make the argument this was, one of the big differences in this game was the fact that the USC offensive line struggled a little bit. Elijah Page had his struggles over at left tackle. even at the right tackle spot, USC had some issues, right? And they're rotating some guys in. You had some injuries. A guy went from one side to the other. There were just issues with the USC offensive line. In fact, the USC had 7 different offensive linemen play at least 25 snaps. So to me, that kind of just tells you. And then you had one guy in Murphy playing left tackle and right tackle, right? So you had to kind of go back and forth between the two sides. There were just issues across the board with the offensive line. And the thing is I think if USC can get some of those offensive line things corrected, another thing you can do is, Lincoln Riley, I do think Lincoln Riley had some issues, some Lincoln Riley deserves some credit for that loss based off of his approach. I know there was a lot of success in the second half. There were also moments where, there are key moments like 3rd and long where you got to get your running back and your tight end to chip a little bit, right? You knew that the offensive line had some struggles. You needed to get those guys to chip and make sure the quarterback was kept clean, because when Miller Moss had time, man, he was delivering some passes downfield. So many solid passes, so many solid moments for Miller Moss. But at the end of the day, he just couldn't overcome the fact that he continuously was pressured by, Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham. Josiah Stewart got after it as well. And he just couldn't overcome that. To me, Lincoln Riley deserves credit for that a little bit. You got to chip a little bit more. And I know that might not be Riley's approach to offense, but, when you're playing a team like Michigan, you got to make some changes, because Michigan knows what you're going to do. They're going to bring 5 guys, which they did a lot, right? And they essentially forced Miller Moss to stay within the pocket, which he's comfortable with. But I felt like Lincoln Riley could have done a little bit more. And then at the end of the game, when USC, there's a moment USC was, driving downfield. They had the football. They're trying to burn the clock. And Lincoln Riley designs 2 pass plays towards the end. I think the 3rd down one was a screenplay. And I'm pretty sure the screenplay was an incomplete pass. And essentially, you stop the clock twice with incomplete passes at the end of the game. To me, that's on Lincoln Riley. You have to do a better job as a coach, right? And I'll be the first to tell you guys, I will always call out whoever it is. It does not matter. If I'm talking Colorado, I'll call out Shedeur Sanders. If I'm talking USC, I'll call out, Miller Moss. If Moss is the issue, I'll call out Lincoln Riley. If he's the issue, at the end of the day, the coaching has to be better. I'll also say this, Miller Moss did have a couple of plays. One was it was the fumble, right, that Miller Moss had. Right tackle pretty much got beat, and it's hard to say it's 100% on the quarterback when the right tackle gets beat as quickly as he does. And it was Kenneth Grant that picked that fumble up and he started running it back. And I forget who it was. But essentially you had the running back just pull the ball. I think it was Marks that pulled it out. It may have been Joyner. I'm pretty sure it was Marks. And he essentially ripped it right out of Kenneth Grant's hands. And it was a 3rd down play as well. So you basically got the 1st down. And then you're able to kind of do some things. You scored a touchdown on that drive, right? So that was a big moment in the game. Right, that play right there. But that's on Miller Moss. You got to protect the ball a little bit better. I know it's towards the right. He was looking towards the left as well. But you got to do a little bit of a better job. And then that pick 6 was killer as well. I know Moss did a great job bringing USC back, especially in the second half. I think it was 14-3 going into halftime. USC scored 14 points in the 3rd quarter. And to me, that's a great part of it. But you also got to protect the ball, because Michigan really didn't do a whole lot in the second half, right? They had the touchdown at the end of the game. And then the only other points they scored was the pick 6, right? So you just got to do a better job if you're Miller Moss. Not the end of the world, right? I think USC will ultimately end up bouncing back. One of the things USC will have to consider as they kind of go forward is, so you do drop in the rankings a little bit, but you do have Penn State in a couple of weeks. Penn State right now is probably going to be ranked in the top 12, I think, by the AP. You'll have Nebraska and Notre Dame at the end of the year. That Notre Dame game to me is going to be the big game, because I think Notre Dame will probably go undefeated up until that USC game, and I think that could be like the difference this season, right? I don't think Notre Dame has many teams left on their schedule that I would say is going to be tough. They do have Louisville, I think, next week. Louisville, I don't know how good they really are, but we'll find out next week against Notre Dame, right? And then Notre Dame really just has USC at the end of the year, right? They play like Navy and Georgia Tech and Florida State. I like Georgia Tech, by the way. I like Brent Key a lot. He's a great offensive coach. I'm an offensive line guy, so I have a little special thing for Brent Key there at Georgia Tech. But Yeah, man, it's going to be interesting. We'll see what ends up happening. Let's talk about the defense just to wrap this up a little bit. Eric Gentry was a man yesterday. Phenomenal game. Uh, it's interesting with Gentry, though, because Gentry had the forced fumble. That was a big play. He had a sack. He had a bunch of tackles for losses. He was just after it, man. And the thing with Eric Gentry was he was really good yesterday. I want to see this guy just be the full-time linebacker because he still comes off the field at times. To me, Gentry's an absolute. He might be the best linebacker for USC. I will say this: I do think Easton Arnold's also very solid as well. But I want to see more from Gentry, man. The guy is long, he's lengthy, he's good as well, and I do think USC has a good defense. Right, they did get some pressure as well. Anthony Lucas had some pressure, and Muhammad Shelby all got after the quarterback a little bit. Some hits, some sacks. Bear Alexander, I felt like was going to be one of the guys that could impact this game. He did have some moments yesterday. I watched the before I started recording here, I watched Colorado's offense and I watched USC's defense as well. Bear Alexander had a couple of nice plays, as did Clifton. Clifton had a couple of nice plays. I think he had like one quarterback hit. USC just has to continue to play their style of football, man. I think they'll bounce back. They're a much better team this year than they were the past years. Maybe not on offense, right? On offense, it's questionable if they're better. But on defense, they are a lot better, right? You definitely see that. And shout out to the defensive coordinator, man. Lynn's done a really good job, right? So shout out to him. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thumbs up, subscribe. We will be doing some USC film breakdowns this week. So subscribe if you're not subscribed. And I'll see you guys next time with another video.